The instant I hit the send button, I realized the terrible mistake I had just made. My thumb froze and a bolt of panic shot through me as I stared at my phone screen. There, in the little blue text bubble, were the 2 words I had never intended to send to that number. Fuck you. My heart plummeted to my stomach. Those angry words had been meant for my ex-boyfriend, a final burst of fury at the end of a very bad day. But in my haze of frustration and tears, I hadn't been paying attention. Instead of selecting Jason's contact from my phone, I had accidentally tapped the wrong entry. Now my furious message was hurtling through cyberspace to a stranger. Not just any stranger. A few months ago, I'd stored a number in my phone after a random encounter, a car accident I had witnessed on 5th Avenue. A tall, well-dressed man in an expensive suit had given me his business card, telling me to call him if the police needed a witness statement from someone who saw the crash. The name on the card was something like D. Costa and a phone number, which I dutifully saved under D. Costa, emergency. I hadn't thought about it since. Now, thanks to my clumsy scrolling and distracted state, that very number was the recipient of my profanity-laden text. I clapped a hand over my mouth, eyes wide as if I could somehow suck the message back in. My pulse pounded in my ears. Oh my God, what had I done? With a shaking finger, I tapped on the message thread. It was too late. The text was marked as delivered. There was no unsend, no magical recall. Those 2 hateful words were now sitting on the phone of a man I barely knew. A man whose contact I had labeled work emergency only. For a moment, I stood in the middle of my tiny living room, frozen in horror. My apartment was silent around me, save for the sound of my own heartbeat thudding in my chest. I closed my eyes, trying to calm down and convince myself that this might not be as catastrophic as it felt. Maybe he wouldn't even read it. Maybe that number wasn't active anymore. Or if he did read it, maybe he'd just shrug it off as an obvious wrong number prank. I started pacing, barefoot on the thin carpet. 5 minutes passed, then 10. My phone remained silent in my hand. No responses, no calls. With each passing minute, I alternated between hope and dread. Part of me prayed he would just ignore it. Another part imagined him being furious and dialing my number to demand an explanation. No, calm down, Emily, I told myself. It was a meaningless mistake. But the longer the silence dragged on, the more my nerves frayed. Who exactly was D. Costa? I racked my brain to recall the brief encounter. I remembered dark, intense eyes, a commanding presence as he directed the scene of the accident until ambulances arrived. He had spoken very little, but when he did, people listened. At the time, I'd assumed he was just a concerned citizen, maybe someone important because the police on scene had recognized him and addressed him respectfully. The memory made my skin prickle. What if he was someone important? Someone who didn't appreciate random insults from unknown numbers? I chewed my bottom lip anxiously. The smart thing to do was probably to send a follow-up text apologizing profusely for the confusion. Yes, of course. I should clarify before this went any further. With trembling fingers, I tapped out a message. I'm so sorry. That was meant for someone else. Wrong number. Please ignore it. My finger hovered over the send button, my entire body taut with secondhand embarrassment and fear. I hit send. A delivered checkmark appeared almost immediately under my frantic apology. I exhaled shakily. There. Hopefully that would defuse any offense. Perhaps Mr. Costa would simply delete the texts and forget about this bizarre blunder. Perhaps I could pretend it never happened and proceed with my life, albeit with a lesson learned about double-checking recipients. Another minute ticked by. Then my phone buzzed in my hand, loud in the quiet apartment. I yelped softly at the sudden vibration and nearly dropped it. A reply? I swallowed hard and looked at the screen. It was a new message from that same number. I tapped it open with a cold sweat breaking out on the back of my neck. The reply was short, just a few words. Is this some kind of joke? I closed my eyes in mortification. He had seen it. Of course he had. Hands shaking, I typed back as quickly and politely as I could, my fingertips clumsy with nerves. No, I swear. It was a mistake. I didn't mean to send that to you. I am so sorry. I hesitated, then added, Please just delete it. The 3 little dots appeared almost immediately, indicating he was typing a response. I stared at them, heart in my throat. They stopped, then started again, as if he was taking his time choosing words. Finally, another message popped up. Who is this? That gave me pause. In my rush to apologize, I hadn't even introduced myself. He probably had no clue who I was. To him, I was just some random number hurling obscenities. My name might not ring any bells, but I had to try. I typed back, "My name is Emily Thompson. We met briefly a few months ago. There was a car accident on 5th Avenue. You gave me your number in case I needed to contact you as a witness. I'm so sorry about the text. It truly wasn't meant for you." I hit send and then waited, gnawing on my thumbnail. The sun had almost completely set now, and my small apartment was growing dim. I didn't bother to turn on a light. My entire focus was on the glowing screen in my hand. The message showed as delivered. No typing bubble appeared this time. Seconds crawled by, stretching into a minute, then 2. The silence was unbearable. I sent another quick message. Again, I sincerely apologize. This has all been a huge misunderstanding. After that, I forced myself to stop spamming him. He clearly wasn't rushing to forgive and forget. By now my nerves were shot. I dropped the phone onto my couch and began pacing again in short, agitated lines across the living room. Every so often I would peek at the phone screen to see if those 3 dots appeared or a new message arrived. Nothing. Maybe he decided it wasn't worth a reply. Maybe he believed me and this was over. Or perhaps he was offended and stewing on a response. I just didn't know. After about 20 agonizing minutes of waiting and worrying, I began to hope that perhaps Mr. Costa had indeed decided to ignore the whole thing. My shoulders started to relax. I even managed a weak laugh at myself for overreacting. People send wrong number texts all the time, right? It's embarrassing, but not the end of the world. I decided I would make a cup of tea to soothe my nerves, and then distract myself with a TV show. Yes, that was a good plan. I was about to step into the kitchen when a low rumble reached me. An engine outside, then another. The sound was distinct even through my closed window, growing louder before cutting off abruptly. Then another and another, one after the other. My heart, which had just begun to settle, jolted back into a sprint. Curiosity and dread propelled me toward my front window. I gently swept aside the thin curtain and peered down onto the street. It was early evening, the sky a deep blue, and the street lamps were flickering on. I lived on the 2nd floor of a small apartment building on a quiet, tree-lined street. Nothing much ever happened here. An occasional barking dog, the clink of my elderly neighbor watering her plants, the typical city hum in the distance. But now something was definitely happening. Right below, lining the curb in front of my building, were 5 large black SUVs. They were parked nose to tail in a precise formation, engines still ticking as they cooled. The vehicles were glossy and hulking, looking absurdly out of place on my modest little street. Each had deeply tinted windows and an imposing, armored appearance. The sight made me catch my breath. It was like a scene from a crime thriller movie had materialized outside my home. I squinted, pressing my forehead to the glass. There were no visible markings on the cars, nothing to indicate they were police or government. But they screamed power and danger. My mind raced. Could this possibly be related to the text? No, that would be insane, wouldn't it? Who sends a fleet of black SUVs because of a mistaken text message? That was pure overkill. Yet I couldn't think of any other explanation for this sudden show of force on my quiet block. Before I could decide what to do, I saw movement. The driver's door of the middle SUV opened. Out stepped a single man. Even from my vantage point on the 2nd floor, I could tell he was tall and broad-shouldered. He moved with a certain lethal grace, adjusting the jacket of what looked like an impeccably tailored dark suit. The remaining SUV's doors stayed shut. It seemed he was the only one exiting, at least for now. The man turned and looked up, directly toward my building, as if he knew exactly which window was mine. I sucked in a breath and ducked back from the curtain reflexively. Had he seen me? My heart thundered. I dared another peek. He stood on the sidewalk now, and even in the dimming light I recognized him. The sharp angles of his face, the strong jaw with a hint of stubble, the way he held himself with an aura of absolute authority. It was the man from the accident, the one who'd given me his number, Mr. Costa. My stomach flipped. Why on earth would he come here in person? This seemed wildly disproportionate to the situation. Yet there he was, looking up at my building with an unreadable expression. As I watched with my heart in my throat, he reached inside his suit jacket, and I glimpsed a metallic shine under the streetlights. Was that a gun? That was all it took to break my paralysis. I stumbled back from the window with a gasp, letting the curtain fall shut. My thoughts careened in a million directions. He'd come. He'd actually shown up, and if that was a weapon I saw, what did that mean for me? None of the possibilities that ran through my mind were good. Before I could think to do anything, call the police, bolt my door, hide under my bed, my phone buzzed loudly in my hand again. I flinched, nearly dropping it for a second time. With dread pooling in my stomach, I raised the phone to look at the new message. "Come downstairs, Miss Thompson. We need to talk." I read those words twice. He knew my name. Of course he did. I had given it to him in the text. But something about seeing it there, used so formally yet possessively by a man who now sat outside my home with a small army, made my blood run cold. "We need to talk." A polite phrasing, perhaps, but somehow it felt like an order. My knees were jelly. I hovered by the window, torn. Should I go? Could I refuse? For a wild instant, I considered dialing 911. What would I even say? "Hi, I accidentally texted an insult to some guy and now he's on my doorstep with several black SUVs full of who knows what." It sounded absurd even in my head, and something told me that bringing the police into whatever this was might only make things worse. I peeked through the curtain again, just a sliver. Mr. Costa was still standing there on the sidewalk, in plain sight, patiently waiting. He had one hand in his pocket now, the other holding a phone, clearly expecting me to comply promptly. The SUVs idled dark and silent behind him, like a pack of predators ready to pounce. My mouth had gone dry. I didn't see any overt threat yet, but the implication was clear. He had come personally, and with backup. This was not a request I could casually dismiss. Another buzz from my phone made me jump. A second text from him. "I am not a patient man, Emily. 5 minutes." He dropped the formal address, using my first name. Somehow that sent an extra jolt of fear through me. A sign of familiarity, or simply a way to show he was in control. Either way, the message was clear. I had 5 minutes to present myself outside. I realized I was already moving, my body making the decision my mind was balking at. With trembling hands, I grabbed the light jacket draped over my sofa and shrugged it on. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror by the door. Shoulder-length brown hair disheveled from running my hands through it. Green eyes wide and bright with fright, face pale as paper. I looked exactly as terrified as I felt. There was no hiding it. I zipped the jacket up halfway, as if it could somehow shield me, and forced down a swallow. This wasn't a social call. It didn't matter what I looked like. I made sure I had my keys and phone, then headed out of my apartment door. The walk down the corridor and stairs felt surreal. Each step echoed in the stairwell, the sound mirroring the pounding of my heart. I couldn't believe this was happening. The world tilted with each step. I felt as though I were walking to my doom. At the building's front entrance, I paused, hand on the door. My reflection faintly stared back at me in the glass pane, small and trembling. I took a deep breath of the cool air seeping in and tried to steel myself. It's just a conversation, I thought. Talk to him. Explain again in person. It will be fine. But even my internal voice quavered with doubt. Pushing the door open, I stepped outside. The evening chill kissed my cheeks, the autumn air carrying the scent of dry leaves and distant city traffic. Twilight had settled, painting the sky in deep blue and purple hues. On any other day, I might have found it beautiful. Right now, I was too anxious to appreciate anything beyond the immediate scene. Mr. Costa stood a few paces from the door, exactly where I had seen him from above. Up close, he was even more striking and intimidating. The man was tall, easily over 6 feet, with a build that filled out his suit with muscular precision. The dim street lamp nearby cast light across his features. High cheekbones, a strong Roman nose, and deep-set eyes that seemed almost black in the twilight. Those eyes fixed on me the moment I emerged, and I felt pinned in place by their intensity. He inclined his head slightly in greeting. His face was impassive, almost cold, except for a certain sharp alertness in his gaze. Everything about him radiated a quiet, restrained power, like a coiled predator observing its prey. "Miss Thompson," he said calmly, his voice low and rich. I detected the faintest hint of an accent curling around the consonants. Italian, if I wasn't mistaken. The way he said my name was polite, but his tone carried an undercurrent that made my stomach flutter with nerves. I swallowed hard, reflexively straightening my posture. "Mr. Costa," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. He lifted a hand slightly, a gesture that managed to both silence me and convey an expectation of compliance. "Before you say anything further," he said. "I think it's best if we continue this conversation somewhere more private." His eyes flicked past me, towards the row of curtained windows in the building behind and even across the street. My elderly neighbor, Mrs. Gilbert, was definitely peeking through her lace curtains from the house opposite, her silhouette barely visible. The neighborhood grapevine would be ablaze by morning with the gossip of me meeting a mysterious man with a motorcade. What? I stammered, though I'd heard him perfectly. "Get in the car," he replied, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. He gestured to the open rear door of the middle SUV, which one of his men, another tall, imposing figure in a dark suit, now held patiently. The man's stoic face might as well have been carved from stone, and he looked ready to scoop me up and place me inside if I refused. My pulse skyrocketed. "What? No, I'm not getting in any car," I protested, taking a half step back toward the doorway. Panic flared bright in my mind. "Look, I said I was sorry. Can't we just forget this happened?" My voice came out in a frantic rush. Something flickered in Mr. Costa's eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or irritation. It was hard to tell in the dim light. He stepped forward one pace. Not enough to invade my personal space, but I felt the aura of him loom. "This isn't about the text, Miss Thompson." "Well, not entirely," he said with cool patience. "You've created a situation that requires my attention, and I prefer to handle delicate matters privately. Now you can get in the car voluntarily, or I can have my men assist you. Your choice." I looked around desperately. The street was empty. No witnesses, no random passers-by I could appeal to for help. The few houses nearby were dark, save Mrs. Gilbert's where her curtain now twitched suspiciously. Even if someone saw, would they intervene? 3 men in suits and 5 black SUVs don't exactly scream damsel in distress. Call 911. They scream government agent or dangerous man. Stay away. And something told me these weren't government agents. My heart hammered. But something in his tone, despite the threat, wasn't overtly hostile. It was businesslike, almost professional. He genuinely wanted to talk, it seemed. The question was, what would happen after the talking? "If I get in that car, where are we going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Somewhere we can talk without your neighbors recording this conversation for social media," he replied evenly, nodding toward a window across the street where I could indeed see a curtain moving. "I promise that after we speak, you will be brought back home safely. But right now, here is not the place." He had a point. This scene probably already had the whole block buzzing. And I certainly didn't want an audience for whatever was about to happen. I realized with a sinking feeling that my options were extremely limited. Running would be foolish. I wouldn't get far and I'd anger him. Refusing could lead to me being bodily forced into that car, which would be even more frightening. My mouth was bone dry. "Fine," I croaked. "But I'm texting my friend your license plate number and telling her if I don't check in within an hour, she calls the police." It was a thin shred of defiance, of control, that I needed to assert. The corner of his mouth twitched. Was that almost a smile? "Smart girl? Please do that. I'd expect nothing less." He even stepped aside politely, giving me space to pull out my phone. One of his men, the one holding the SUV door, waited impassively. The interior beyond him looked plush, dark leather seats and a partition for privacy. I quickly typed out a message to my best friend Jenna, with shaking fingers. "Hey, emergency came up. I'm with that guy from the accident, Dominic. We'll explain later. I'm safe, don't worry. If you don't hear from me in 1 hour, call the police." It wasn't a perfect message, but I hoped it would do. Her reply came within seconds. "What?" "Emily, are you okay? Who is this guy? Call me ASAP." I grimaced but didn't have time to get into a back and forth. Instead, I just responded, "I'm okay, promise. We'll call when I can. Don't worry, just needed to let you know." I took a deep breath as I slipped the phone back into my pocket. She'd be freaked out, but at least she wouldn't be completely in the dark. That done, I forced one foot in front of the other and approached the open SUV door. "Good," Mr. Costa said quietly as I drew near. He was standing by the door now, one hand resting on the top of the frame. Up close, he loomed even larger, and I had to tilt my head to meet his eyes. "After you, Miss Thompson." I hesitated only a heartbeat. Then, summoning every drop of courage, I ducked my head and climbed into the back seat. The interior was dimly lit and smelled of rich leather and a hint of Mr. Costa's cologne, a dark, woodsy scent. My legs felt like jelly as I scooted into the middle of the seat. He slid in beside me an instant later, moving with fluid confidence. The door closed with a heavy thud, sealing us inside. The tinted silence was palpable. A moment later, the SUV pulled smoothly away from the curb, the other vehicles falling into formation around us. I stared straight ahead, trying to process that I was actually doing this, sitting in a car with a mysterious man who might be very dangerous. My hands twined nervously in my lap. We rode in silence for the first minute or two. My mind churned with questions, fears, wild scenarios of what he could possibly want to talk about. I snuck a glance at him from the corner of my eye. He was leaning back, profile illuminated faintly by the passing streetlights. Everything about his posture was relaxed, composed. It made me painfully aware of how rigid I was sitting. "Where are we going?" I finally asked, unable to bear the quiet. My voice sounded too loud in the enclosed space. "My restaurant," he replied, turning his head toward me. "It's closed for the evening, which makes it an ideal private setting. Have you eaten dinner?" I blinked. That was not what I expected him to say. "You're taking me to dinner?" The disbelief was clear in my tone. A hint of something, dry humor, touched his expression. "I'm taking you somewhere private where we can discuss your situation. The fact that they serve excellent food is merely a bonus." He paused, then added in a slightly gentler tone, "You're not in danger, Miss Thompson, at least not from me, but you need to understand something about the text you sent." My stomach churned. "What about it?" He rested an elbow on the armrest between us, regarding me with those penetrating eyes. "That number you have, the one I gave you at the accident, it isn't my personal cell. It's a business line, a line that several of my associates monitor for security purposes." Oh God. I felt my face flame with fresh mortification. "So, other people saw the message," I whispered. His head inclined. 4 people, including myself. I wanted to sink through the leather seat and disappear. It was bad enough that he saw my furious outburst. But 3 other unknown individuals? I thought I might die of embarrassment on the spot. I buried my face in my hands for a moment. "I'm going to die of humiliation," I mumbled. "There are worse ways to die," he said. And I could have sworn there was a faint note of amusement in his voice. "But the issue isn't the embarrassment. The issue is that now 4 people in my organization know that a civilian has my direct emergency line, and they've seen you send something that could be interpreted as either a very bold insult or a very stupid attempt at provocation." Provocation? I lifted my head, genuinely confused. Why would anyone think that? It was clearly a mistake. He gave me a small, almost pitying smile. "Miss Thompson, you seem like a smart woman, so I'll be direct. Do you know who I am? What I do?" I stared at him blankly. "You're some kind of businessman, I assume. You gave me your card that said Costa Enterprises, and to be honest, I never really looked you up or anything." He studied me closely, as if searching for any deceit. Whatever he saw made him let out a slight breath. "I'm the head of the Costa family," he said simply. I waited, but when he offered no further detail, I just blinked. Okay. Is that supposed to mean something to me? Now he definitely looked a little amused. "You really don't know." "Know what?" "The Costa family controls a number of business interests in this city. Import, export, real estate, restaurants, construction. We have our fingers in many pies, as the saying goes." Understanding began to dawn slowly, like a dark cloud coming into focus. Family. Business interests. It sounded an awful lot like coded language. "You're in the mob," I breathed, barely audible. "Mob is such a crude word," he replied with a slight smile. "I prefer to think of it as a family business with deep traditional roots." I recoiled instinctively against the car door, putting a few more inches between us. My pulse was skyrocketing again. "Oh my God," I whispered, heart pounding. "I just told a mafia boss to I couldn't even say it out loud again. "This is how I die. This is actually how my life ends." "Calm down," he said sharply, though not unkindly. "If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. I certainly wouldn't waste an evening chatting with you first." Not exactly reassuring, but he had a point. I took a few shallow breaths, trying not to hyperventilate. "It means I believe you're telling the truth about the text being a mistake," he continued. "If I thought otherwise, we wouldn't be speaking right now. But here's the problem. My world operates on perception and reputation. If word got out that some random woman had my private number and sent me an insult, and I did nothing about it, it could be misinterpreted. It could make me appear weak, or suggest that I was compromised somehow. I struggled to find my voice. So, what are you saying? What do we need to do about it? My mind conjured all sorts of terrifying solutions, none of them pleasant for me. He was quiet for a moment as the car turned a corner. We were entering a more upscale part of town now, I realized. Tree-lined streets, expensive boutiques closed for the night, fewer pedestrians. Finally he spoke, each word deliberate. Firstly, I need to impress upon you that what you've learned about me tonight cannot be shared. With anyone. I nodded frantically. Of course. Believe me, I have zero desire to go blabbing about this. I just want to get out of this mess alive. A ghost of a wry smile touched his lips. Good. And you will get out of it alive. As I said, I'm not going to harm you. My preference is to resolve this cleanly, without violence. That's why we're talking. I began to unclench slightly from my tight ball of anxiety. He had said repeatedly he didn't mean me harm, and I was starting to believe him, at least in the sense that he wasn't going to kill me for a mistake. But then what was he going to do? The SUV slowed, then made another turn. We passed under a familiar awning, and I realized we were stopping in front of a restaurant with gold script on the awning. Costa Trattoria. I'd heard of this place, an upscale Italian restaurant that had rave reviews, though I'd never been able to afford a meal there myself. The vehicle came to a smooth stop. The driver and front passenger got out first. A moment later, our door opened. A man with silver at his temples, another of Mr. Costa's crew, presumably, inclined his head politely. Sir, ma'am, we're here. Mr. Costa, Dominic, I reminded myself numbly, stepped out, then extended a hand to help me from the car. I took it, my legs a bit weak after the tension of the ride. The night air was crisp and carried the mouth-watering aroma of garlic and herbs from the restaurant. Inside, the trattoria's lights were low and warm. It was empty of patrons, of course. A few staff hovered, chefs or waiters, whispering until Dominic nodded and waved a hand. They quickly disappeared, likely out a back exit, leaving us truly alone in the softly lit dining room. Have a seat wherever you like, Dominic said, gesturing to the intimate arrangement of tables. Awkwardly, I sank into a chair at a nearby table, setting my purse down and folding my hands to stop them trembling. The whole situation felt surreal. The elegant ambiance, the checkered tablecloth, a vase of fresh roses at the center, and me, frazzled and scared, sitting across from a mafia boss for what amounted to a private dinner. Dominic slid into the chair opposite me. In the quiet, I could hear the subtle ticking of a clock and my own nervous breathing. He regarded me for a long moment, fingers steepled, as if deciding how to begin. You must have questions, he said finally, breaking the silence. Please, ask them. I know tonight has been a shock. My throat was dry, but I managed a croaky, incredulous laugh. A shock? You could say that. I feel like I've stepped into an alternate universe. His lips quirked faintly. I imagine you do. I took a deep breath, focusing on one concern at a time. What exactly do you intend to do with me? I asked bluntly. You went to a lot of trouble tonight. You could have just called and warned me to keep quiet, or threatened me anonymously. But instead you... Well, all this. I gestured around at the empty restaurant, the motorcade visible through the front window. Dominic's dark eyes never left my face. I handle things a certain way, Emily. I don't leave loose ends. And now, through no fault of your own, you've become a part of something that has to be managed carefully. I can't simply let you walk away without any assurance that this incident will be contained. My stomach tightened. So you are planning to keep me quiet one way or another? He tilted his head. I already said I won't hurt you, and I meant it. But yes, I need your cooperation in handling the optics of this mishap. Optics, I echoed. What does that even mean in this context? Dominic leaned forward slightly, forearms resting on the table. He had removed his suit jacket, draping it over the back of his chair, and rolled his shirt sleeves to the forearm. I couldn't help but notice the flex of tendons in his strong wrists as he clasped his hands. Focus, Emily. Several of my people are aware of what happened. Right now, they believe only what they saw. An unknown woman had access to a direct line to me and sent a disrespectful message. They don't have context that it was an accident, or meant for someone else. Understandably, they're alarmed and confused. Some might think it was a deliberate show of disrespect or a test from an enemy. I swallowed hard. imagining the perspectives of these faceless associates. Okay, so how do we convince them it wasn't? His gaze flickered over me almost appraisingly. We give them an alternative explanation, one that makes perfect sense and doesn't raise any further questions. A knot formed between my eyebrows. Which is? Dominic sat back slightly. That you aren't a random stranger at all. That you are, in fact, someone close to me, someone with every right to have my number and whose emotional texts can be chalked up to a personal tiff, nothing more. I blinked, replaying his words. Someone close to him? Emotional texts? You want me to pretend to be... What exactly? Your colleague, friend? His expression softened a touch, almost apologetic. My girlfriend. I nearly choked on thin air. Excuse me? He spread his hands lightly. Think about it. If my men believe you're my girlfriend, or at least someone I'm personally involved with, then the message reads as a private lover's quarrel. They'll be embarrassed for having even seen it, and they certainly won't question it further. It ceases to be a security issue entirely. I gaped at him. You can't be serious, I protested. You want me to pretend to be involved with you? That we're... together? His lips pressed into a flat line, only for a short time. Long enough for this to blow over and for word to spread that Emily Thompson is under my personal protection, and by my side of her own accord. After that, you can quietly exit, and I'll ensure no one bothers you about it again. My mind was reeling once more. Of all the outrageous solutions, this one took the cake. I looked at the impossibly handsome, impossibly dangerous man sitting across from me, and tried to imagine acting like his girlfriend. This is insane, Emily. Say no. Just say no. But what was my alternative? If I said no, I doubted he would simply let me stroll out of here and go back to my life. He'd still need to contain things. The word contain sent a chill down my spine. I licked my lips nervously. And if I refuse? A shadow crossed his face. I hope you won't. As I said, I don't want to force your hand. But if you refuse to cooperate at all, I'll have to consider other methods, such as relocating you until I'm sure things have died down or other less pleasant measures. I'd rather it not come to that. My heart thudded. The threat was implicit but clear. Comply, or be effectively held prisoner anyway. The girlfriend ruse at least gave me a veneer of choice and dignity. You promise that after, say, a few days I can go home and things will be normal? I asked quietly. His face softened almost imperceptibly. Yes. Once I'm confident no one misinterprets what happened, you'll be free to resume your life. And I'll ensure you're left alone thereafter. He paused. In fact, you'll be safer than ever, because anyone who knows will think you still have my protection. It was twisted logic, but I followed it. I inhaled slowly, then exhaled. All right, I said, hardly believing the word was coming out of my mouth. I'll do it. I'll go along with your plan. Dominic's shoulders relaxed a fraction, as if he'd been genuinely concerned I might say no. Thank you, Emily. You're making a wise decision. Yeah, well, I really hope so, I muttered, slumping back in my chair with a shaky sigh. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. To my surprise, he then stood and, without warning, extended a hand to me. Come with me. I stared at his hand. Where? His tone gentled. To the kitchen. You haven't eaten. Let me fix you a plate while we iron out the details. As if on cue, my stomach gave a small rumble. I flushed, realizing I was indeed hungry. The adrenaline had masked it. After a beat, I slid my hand into his. The gesture felt strangely natural, and his hand was warm and steady around mine. In the kitchen, I found myself chopping tomatoes under his guidance, while he heated a pan with olive oil and garlic. There was a bizarre normalcy to it, standing beside a mafia boss making pasta at nearly midnight. But oddly, it eased my tension. He moved with practiced ease, sleeves rolled up, occasionally giving the barest hint of a smile when I managed not to cut myself dicing basil. He mentioned that his grandmother taught him to cook as a boy back in Naples. By the time we sat at a small table in the kitchen with 2 steaming bowls of spaghetti al pomodoro and some crusty bread, I realized I was actually smiling a little. The simple dish smelled heavenly, and when I took a bite, I couldn't help a moan of appreciation. Good? He asked, watching me with an almost hopeful look. Amazing, I admitted sincerely. It was easily the best pasta I'd ever had. Or maybe hunger and stress just made it taste that way. Either way, he looked pleased. We ate quietly for a few minutes. My nerves had settled considerably. The world outside felt far away, and for a short time, we were just two people sharing a late meal. If someone had told me this morning I'd be dining with a mafia boss and not fearing for my life, I'd have laughed in their face. As I pushed my empty bowl aside, exhaustion tugged at me. The emotional roller coaster of the evening was catching up. I stifled a yawn. Dominic noticed. "It's late. I should get you somewhere you can rest." I tensed slightly. "Where, exactly?" "My home," he answered matter-of-factly. "It's secure, and it's where anyone who needs to see us together can find us if necessary." He must have sensed my apprehension, because he added, "You'll have your own quarters, of course, and you'll be treated as an honored guest." I bit my lip. I really had very little say in these arrangements, but it helped a bit to hear him clarify. "All right." Within minutes, he had his team mobilized. The SUVs were back in formation, and Dominic and I were headed out of the city toward his estate. The tension of earlier had ebbed some. I wasn't sitting rigid with fear now, but I remained alert. My phone showed a couple of worried messages from Jenna that I promised myself I'd address soon. But for now, I simply told her I'd call in the morning and that I was safe. City lights gave way to darker, tree-lined roads as we drove into a wealthy suburban area. At some point, I must have dozed off. I jolted awake as our SUV swerved slightly. Headlights flashed behind us through the rear window. I realized with a spike of alarm that our vehicle was accelerating. Dominic's arm shot out protectively across my front, just as the driver cursed in Italian. Tires squealed. A loud pop-pop-pop shattered the silence. Gunshots unmistakable. My stomach lurched. "Down!" Dominic barked. He didn't wait. He grabbed me and hauled me off the seat, pushing me to the floor of the SUV. I curled into the footwell as a barrage of loud thunks pelted the back of the vehicle. Bulletproof plating, I realized dazedly. Sparks flew from the spider-webbed rear window. Our driver took a hard turn. The SUV fishtailed, throwing Dominic against me. He grunted, bracing one hand on the seat back while keeping my head down with the other. Another volley of shots rang out, deafening in the enclosed space. I whimpered, clapping my hands over my ears. The convoy's radio crackled. I couldn't catch the Italian, but Dominic growled something back, his voice ice-cold. I felt the vehicle lurch as we gained speed. There was a crunching impact behind us, and the flash of flames in the side mirror. A pursuing car had lost control and hit a tree, now bursting into flames. "Car 2, report." Dominic snapped into a small earpiece. A tinny voice replied that the second hostile vehicle was fleeing, and no casualties on our side. Only then did Dominic exhale. I realized I was shaking violently, still huddled on the floor. His arm was around me, keeping me tucked in the space between the seats. "Emily," he said urgently. "Are you hurt?" My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Adrenaline coursed like ice in my veins. I touched my face and felt a warm trickle. There was a small cut on my cheek from the glass, but nothing major. "I don't think so," I managed. He noticed the blood and his jaw went tight. "Just a scratch," he muttered, almost to himself with obvious relief. "We're almost at my estate. You're safe now." Safe? We'd nearly been killed in a drive-by shooting on a quiet suburban road. My mind struggled to catch up. Who the hell was trying to kill him? And by extension, me? When we finally passed through tall, wrought-iron gates and up a winding drive to a sprawling manor, I felt like I'd been spit out of a tornado. Men with rifles flanked the driveway, shouting orders and clearing us through. The SUVs screeched to a halt in front of the mansion's grand entrance. Dominic practically lifted me out of the car. My legs felt like mush. A cluster of armed guards ran to meet him, receiving rapid instructions. Amid the flurry, Dominic kept a firm arm around me, guiding me into the house. My eyes darted wildly, taking in marble floors, vaulted ceilings, ornate fixtures, everything opulent, but I barely registered it. My entire body was trembling. I had never been shot at before, never come anywhere close to that kind of violence. Dominic led me into a cozy library off the main hall and sat me on a leather sofa. A fire crackled in the hearth, its warmth a stark contrast to the cold terror still coursing through me. He knelt in front of me, first aid kit in hand. With deft, gentle movements, he cleaned the cut on my cheek and placed a small bandage over it. I flinched at the sting of antiseptic. "Sorry," he murmured. His fingers were surprisingly tender as they brushed a stray shard of glass from my hair. "Emily, look at me." I hadn't realized I was staring into space. I dragged my eyes to his. His gaze was fierce, intent. "I promise you," he said slowly, I will not let anyone harm you. What happened out there? His jaw clenched. It shouldn't have happened. I failed to anticipate that attack, but I won't let it happen again. My throat tightened. I blinked rapidly, realizing tears had gathered in my eyes. The shock, fear, and relief all rushed through me at once. Without thinking, I pitched forward. My arms went around his neck as I buried my face against his shoulder, choking back a sob. For a split second, I wasn't sure how he'd react, but then I felt his arms wrap around me, pulling me securely against the solid breath of him. He was warm, steady, an anchor in the storm of my emotions. I was so scared, I whispered into his shirt, voice trembling. I thought we were going to die. His hold tightened almost imperceptibly. I know, he said, a low rumble near my ear. You're safe now. I'm sorry they got this far. That bastard Salvatore. I pulled back slightly at the unfamiliar name, and Dominic's eyes flashed with anger. One of my own, he explained bitterly. A security officer betrayed me. He must have tipped off our rivals and disabled some of our defenses. He's the reason those men found us tonight. But it's over. We've secured the property, and I'm not leaving your side again. The intensity in his voice and the fierce protectiveness in his eyes made my breath catch. This man who, hours ago, had been a source of terror for me, was now the person I clung to for safety. It made no sense, but it felt undeniable. Impulsively, I reached up and pressed a shaky kiss to his cheek. Thank you, I whispered, for saving me. Twice in one night, no less. Dominic actually looked a touch startled. Something gentled in his face, and he cleared his throat. I'm just sorry you were put in danger at all. This is my world spilling over onto you, and it shouldn't have. We stayed like that for a moment, kneeling on the rug amidst fallen books in the aftermath of chaos, holding on to each other. Eventually, he rose and helped me to my feet. I was exhausted down to my bones. Every adrenaline crash, every emotion, all were hitting me full force. I swayed, and he steadied me with a hand at my elbow. You've been through a lot tonight, he said softly. Let's get you to bed. I tensed at the phrasing, and he quickly added, Your own room, of course, somewhere you can rest. He guided me out of the library and up a grand staircase. I was too drained to marvel at the luxurious surroundings. We stopped at a door down a quiet hall. Dominic opened it to reveal a spacious guest suite with a king-size bed, a plush armchair, and double doors leading to an attached bath. He fetched one of his soft t-shirts for me to use as a nightshirt, and placed it in my hands. Your clothes will be cleaned and returned by morning, he said. Make yourself comfortable. If you need anything, I'll be right down the hall. I nodded, clutching the shirt. Now that the immediate danger had passed, a wave of weariness nearly bowled me over. Thank you, I managed, sincere in spite of everything. You don't have to keep thanking me, he replied gently. With that, he gave me a last searching look, as if confirming I was truly all right, then stepped out, pulling the door partway closed. Left alone in the opulent silence, I released a long, shaky breath. What a day. I changed into his t-shirt, which hung to my thighs and smelled faintly of him, a fact I tried not to dwell on, and crawled into the big bed. Sleep came the instant my head hit the pillow. When I awoke, sunlight was streaming through half-drawn curtains. For a brief, blissful moment, I'd forgotten where I was. I sat up, stretching, and froze at the sight of the unfamiliar room. It all came crashing back. The text, the SUVs, Dominic, the ambush. Yet I was alive, and surprisingly, not locked in a dungeon or something. In fact, I was in possibly the most comfortable bed ever, cocooned in a cloud of high thread count bedding. A knock at the door startled me. Yes, I called softly. A young woman in a black and white uniform peeked in. Good morning, miss. Mr. Costa asked me to see if you're awake and if you'd like breakfast. I blinked. Oh, yes, thank you. I'll be down. Or where should I? She smiled. I can show you to the breakfast room whenever you're ready. She left me to freshen up. My clothes, true to Dominic's word, were laundered and folded at the foot of the bed. Within 15 minutes, I was dressed in yesterday's jeans and sweater and following the maid down a sweeping staircase. Dominic was already at the breakfast table, sipping espresso and reading something on a tablet. He stood politely as I entered. Good morning, Emily, he said, with a slight smile that did not go unnoticed by the maid, whose eyebrows rose a fraction as she excused herself. Morning, I replied shyly, taking a seat across from him. Despite everything, in the daylight he looked more approachable. dressed in a charcoal cashmere sweater instead of a suit. The harsh lines of his face softened by a genuine warmth in his eyes as he looked at me. "How did you sleep?" he asked. "Better than I expected," I admitted, and it was true. For the first time in ages, I hadn't woken up from stress dreams about my ex or work or anything. Go figure. Just add actual mobsters and my usual worries apparently took a back seat. He chuckled softly, seeming to guess my thoughts. A housekeeper arrived with a trolley of food. Fluffy scrambled eggs, fresh fruit, pastries, the works. My stomach growled, reminding me I'd skipped dinner and survived an ordeal last night. As we began eating, Dominic cleared his throat. "I have an update. We identified the traitor I mentioned, Salvatore, and we caught him trying to slip away in the early hours. He's being dealt with." I winced at the implication. "And the people who attacked us belong to a rival family. Their boss, Carlo Vitale, has been making moves against me for a while. Last night, with Salvatore's help, he tried to take a shot at me. It didn't go as planned." Dominic's voice was grimly satisfied. My fork paused in midair. "Is that? We're going to escalate now?" He considered, then shook his head. "No. In fact, Vitale reached out through back channels just an hour ago, essentially begging for terms. He failed, lost faith in men, and now knows I'm aware of his mole. The situation will be resolved swiftly." I was both relieved and slightly unnerved by how calmly he spoke of such deadly games, but I couldn't deny I felt safer knowing the immediate threat had passed. We lapsed into a comfortable silence, both absorbed in thoughts as we ate. After a while, I dabbed my lips and mustered a smile. "This is delicious. Though I suppose I shouldn't be surprised that you have amazing chefs at your beck and call." He waved a hand. "I'm glad you enjoy it. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry you got dragged into all this. You were having a normal life until I stormed in." I gave a half smile. "It wasn't that normal. Trust me, the day I had before texting you was already awful. This definitely put things in perspective." "Your ex?" he queried gently. I realized he remembered the context of my mistaken text, my anger at Jason. "Yeah," I sighed. "He cheated on me and lied about it. Last night I was stewing over his latest obnoxious message, and I guess I snapped." A flash of anger crossed Dominic's face on my behalf. "He sounds like an idiot." "He is," I agreed with a faint grin. "A childish, hurtful idiot." Dominic reached across the table and, to my surprise, took my hand. It was a simple, comforting gesture. For whatever it's worth, his stupidity led to this. To us. Life is strange, isn't it? My cheeks warmed. "Very strange," I murmured, squeezing his hand lightly. A throat cleared nearby, making me jump slightly. One of Dominic's suited men, the silver-haired one, stood at the entry. "Apologies, sir. There's a matter requiring your attention." Dominic's jaw tightened, clearly annoyed at the interruption, but he nodded. "Excuse me, Emily. I'll be back in just a moment." As he stepped aside with the man, their voices dropped low. I sipped my coffee, gazing out the window at the sunlit gardens, trying not to eavesdrop. I caught a few snippets, something about Vitale and delivered to the warehouse. Dominic's tone was firm, commanding. He returned shortly, an apology in his eyes. Minor issue. Now, where were we? I decided not to pry into his business dealings. Instead, I offered a small smile. We were marveling at how life works in mysterious ways. His expression eased into a matching smile. "Ah, yes." He resumed his seat, but this time he didn't let go of my hand. "Emily, I want you to know that you're free to move around the house or grounds today as you like. You'll see increased security, but it's only precautionary. You are safe here." It hit me then how much had changed in such a short time. Yesterday, I'd have given anything to never hear from Dominic Costa again. Now, the thought of leaving his protective orbit filled me with unease. "Thank you," I said softly. "For everything. I mean it." He shook his head as if dismissing my gratitude, but his thumb stroked absently over the back of my hand, a reassuring caress. My heart fluttered. This was supposed to be a ruse, a charade, but it was feeling less and less like one. The tenderness in his touch, the warmth in his gaze, none of that felt fake. Later that day, Dominic took me on a leisurely stroll around his estate's gardens, under the guise of being seen by a few of his associates. Word had clearly spread about me. The staff and security all acted respectfully, even fondly, like I truly was their boss's sweetheart. We wandered down a path lined with rose bushes, out of earshot of others. Dominic gently laced his fingers with mine. "How are you holding up?" I smiled up at him. "Honestly, I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. It's all a lot to take in, but I feel safe with you." His eyes softened. "You are safe with me." We paused near a fountain, water trickling soothingly. Dominic reached out and tucked a wind-blown strand of hair behind my ear. The touch was light, almost hesitant. "About our arrangement," he began quietly. "If at any point you feel uncomfortable or if anyone treats you with anything less than respect, you tell me immediately. I won't have you unhappy." My chest ached at the earnestness in his voice. Here was a man who ran a criminal empire, asking me if I was okay and vowing to ensure my happiness within a fake relationship he orchestrated. It was sweet, and a little heartbreaking, because I realized I didn't want it to be fake at all. The afternoon passed peacefully. I even video called Jenna from Dominic's office, with his permission and supervision, to assure her I was all right. I gave her a heavily sanitized account, that I was staying with a friend for a few days to sort out personal issues. She wasn't entirely convinced, but hearing and seeing that I was safe calmed her down. As dusk fell, Dominic and I settled on his balcony, overlooking the estate as the sky streaked orange and pink. He had changed into a casual button-down, and I wore a soft sweater and leggings that one of the staff had procured for me. Apparently, being a pretend mafia girlfriend came with a new wardrobe, which I wasn't complaining about. I leaned on the railing, watching the first stars peek out. Dominic stood behind me, a comforting presence radiating warmth. "Penny for your thoughts?" he murmured close to my ear. I smiled, just thinking how crazy this all is. A few days ago I thought my life was over, and I was cursing fate for that mistaken text. I turned in his arms, looking up at him. Now it feels like fate might have known what it was doing after all. He brushed his thumb gently along my jaw. That text was the strangest start to something I could never have predicted. I'd closed myself off for so long, thinking it was too dangerous to let anyone in. Then you came crashing through, apologizing for something you didn't mean to do, stirring up my life. And my heart swelled at his words. "Me neither," I confessed softly, a tear of joy slipping free. I smiled through my tears. "So our arrangement, our pretending?" He lifted my hand, pressing a tender kiss to the back of it. "No more pretending. If you'll have me, for real, I'm yours." A laugh of pure happiness bubbled up in me. "I think I already was yours from the moment you told me not to worry in that car," I admitted. "Maybe even from the minute you showed up with 5 SUVs to rescue a girl from her own awkward text." He chuckled at that, a low, warm sound I adored. "I promise I'll make sure you never have to send me a text like that again, wrong number or not." I laughed, and Dominic cupped my face in his hands, his eyes shining with something deep and true. Slowly he bent his head and kissed me. This kiss was different from the frantic, fearful ones we'd shared in the heat of danger. This was soft and unhurried, filled with all the unspoken feelings we'd been building. I melted against him, wrapping my arms around his neck, returning every ounce of affection. When we finally parted, both breathless and smiling, he rested his forehead against mine. "You know," he murmured, "if someone told me yesterday that I'd be utterly smitten with a woman who accidentally told me off via text, I'd have said they were insane." "Smitten, I raised an eyebrow playfully. He gave a little shrug, pretending nonchalance even as he grinned. "Hopelessly." "Well, for the record, I'm pretty hopeless too," I said softly, my cheeks warm. And to think, it all started with 2 little words I thought would ruin everything. Dominic tilted my chin up, looking at me with an intensity that made my toes curl. Sometimes the best things begin with the smallest of accidents. I couldn't agree more. In that moment, held in his arms on a beautiful evening, I realized that my normal life had been irrevocably derailed, and I didn't mind one bit. It had led me to Dominic, to this thrilling, unexpected love. He gestured to the sky where the first stars twinkled. "Make a wish," he said. "I don't need to," I replied, resting my head against his chest as we gazed upward together. It already came true. And as Dominic's arms tightened around me, I knew that my once upside-down world had found a new and better balance, with him by my side, exactly where he was meant to be.